Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the higher ed day of our annual employer training. For those of you that have attended these in the past, um, you're probably used to seeing one of us standing at a podium delivering a presentation. We're going to try a little bit of a different format today. You're going to get three of us at once instead of one, so we'll be more of a panel discussion style. Let me just kind of go over some housekeeping items. We have some breaks scheduled, a couple 10-minute breaks to break things up. Also, as we switch out panelists, we'll just take very brief breaks, just long enough to have people, leave the table and someone else take their place. We encourage questions. The more questions you ask, probably the better off the presentation will be. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your little Zoom panel. That's where you can go in and type questions. If they're relevant to the topic that we're discussing at the time, we'll try to answer them as they come in. Some we might wait till the end of that topic. I just want to say that we can't answer questions regarding individual people, specific files. Those would be better handled via a phone call or an email. Also, we'll be sending out surveys tomorrow, so please take some time and give us some feedback. We want this to be useful for you, so please give us feedback on how we do. Also, certificates will be mailed out, or rather emailed out. That probably won't be till next week, though. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please press F5 to refresh. That usually sorts them out. So let me just start with introducing myself. My name is Jeff George. I've been with TRSL since 2006, first in the retirement department, and then joined the employer services department when it was created in 2014, and that's where I've been since. To my left is Kelly Resnick. You want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, again, my name is Kelly Resnick. I've been with teachers a little over 11 years. I started out in the retirement department, worked various sections, and I moved over to employer services, and where I'm currently the employer services trainer.
And to my right is Sharon Lashney.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Lashney. I'm currently the supervisor for the employer audit section here in employer services. Prior to that, I was the one of the employer training specialists. And prior to that, I did many different jobs here at the retirement system. I've been an employee here for over 25 years.
Right. And kicking things off, we're going to start with kind of just a general TRSL update from our Deputy Director, Douglas Winston.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 2025 annual employer training. I'm going to just give you a quick overlook of some of our most recent information from our most recent valuation, and just kind of a few quick updates regarding the system overall. So if you're following along on the slide deck, our active members and our retirees last year grew by right around 1,000 each, keeping in line with what we've seen over the prior years. Total benefits that we paid out stayed steady at $2.5 billion. Again, staying steady over the last 3 years. And you can see here our investment returns. Net of fees last year was 7.7. So keeping in line with what our current discount rate is. Our total net assets have grown. You can see over the past 3 years, going from 25.1 billion to 26.1 billion, and then last year 27.4 billion. So good returns overall. And then that actuarial return rate, that smoothed rate, that really takes kind of a weighted average over the 5-year period, came in last year at 7.01. So relatively good news overall. Things staying steady as far as membership, retirees, and benefits. If we go to the next page, this is one we really like to see here. You can see here that, and I don't know if the numbers are showing up for you or not. They're not for me currently, but you can see the line in the graph going up steadily. Last fiscal year, we showed a funded ratio of 77.6. And that has continued to grow every year. In 2010, I believe, is when that first number of 55.1 starts off. So definitely having a higher funded ratio. We always like to show this graph to show the health of the system. It shows a healthy system, a funded ratio that's increasing. That's something we definitely like to see, that shows the health of the system. And that's really looking back. This next slide looks forward. It shows our actuarial projections with the unfunded accrued liability and those actuarial payments. Currently, our schedules are set to be paid off in 2029 and 2039. And you can see that line at the bottom, the light gray line, showing those payments decreasing towards the UAL as those schedules fall off. And our UAL overall fell last fiscal year from 8.5 billion to 8 billion. So again, good news looking in the past, and as we go forward, you see, projected rates and the UAL balance falling a little bit. Just a quick message about the system. Some of the things we've seen over the last year. If we go to the next slide. We have gotten information recently that there have been third parties that have been reaching out to employees. I don't know if you've seen this as much in higher ed, but we've seen a lot of this. We've seen an uptick recently. People saying that they're either teachers retirement specialists, teachers retirement advisory group, and they will use confusing email addresses or names to make people think that they are affiliated with TRSL. TRSL does not employ or authorize any outside third-party vendors to represent TRSL. They do not have TRSL information. The only exception for that is if you have ORP participants who have a financial advisor through their vendor, that the vendors are somebody that we contract with, but those people in the ORP are going to know who their vendors are and know that that service is through them. One of the reasons we really bring this up is, we do advise people if they have questions about their retirement, they can contact a financial advisor, but we tell them to make sure that you receive the information from TRSL to make sure that if you're going to use an outside financial advisor, that you have all the correct information. Because if you have someone who has taken sabbatical, has gone on LWOP, has a certain amount of sick leave, those can change estimates, that can change service credit. And if someone is just looking at, hey, I think I understand how the system works and I can come up with an estimate of what we think your retirement benefit's going to be, that may not be correct. And we just don't want people to rely upon a third party that may not understand how to correctly compute service credit, FAC, whatever that may be. We'd really like to tell people, log into Member Access, get your own information, or come to us and ask us for the information so that your employees can properly plan for the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Douglas. So, kind of looking ahead at what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start off just talking about EMIS. What is it? How do you get to it? Some things that you can do in it. How do you get access to it? We're going to cover eligibility enrollments, trying to figure out who's eligible for membership. Then we're going to cover the ORP, optional retirement plan. Then we're going to talk about the employer's responsibility regarding submitting their monthly contribution and salary reports. Talk about service credit. What is it? How to certify and make corrections, and what's the employer's responsibility once somebody applies for retirement. And finally, we're going to finish up with return to work. So before we really jump into any of these topics, though, let's just briefly talk about our employer procedures manual. Everything that we're going to cover today really comes from that employer procedures manual. And, I know that it's a big manual, big document, a lot of information in it. It can be kind of intimidating, just the sheer size of it.
Right.
But we've tried to make it very easy for employers to navigate. So there's a table of contents on each page of the procedures manual, for each index. That content is clickable. So click a link. It's going to take you, to the portion of that index that deals with that topic. And maybe you have a keyword that you're searching for. You can do Control F, type in that word, and it's going to, do a search in that index and bring you right to the word you're looking for. So we really want to encourage employers, if you're not already really familiar with our employer procedures manual, to give it a try. It's a great resource. A lot of examples, how-to screenshots. It's there, it's there to help you. So I just want to kind of put that out there that we do have a very detailed employer procedures manual, and encourage all of you to use it.
And I guess I would just add that, here at the Teachers Retirement System, we have a lot of different form numbers. Sometimes a specific type of form has to be completed. Whatever that form number is or starts with, that is the index number that corresponds with that form in the procedures manual. So if you're completing a form number 16 for ORP related issues, that index would be index 16.
Yeah, there is a method to these index numbers and form
Yes.
numbers. They all do tie together.
Yeah, and if you're looking for the Employer Procedures Manual, we have revamped our website. If you've been out there, we just revamped it. So you'll have to click on the Employers tab, and underneath the Employers tab, you'll see where the Procedures Manual is, and you can click on that, and it'll lead you to all the indexes.
Okay. So we're going to start at the very beginning. In index 0, kind of introduction to EMIS, and then we'll go into index 1, basically how to get access to EMIS. So EMIS, you're going to hear that acronym a lot. It stands for Employer Membership Information Site. This is pretty much your TRSL hub. This is where you go to view member records, to correct member records, submit files to us. So Kelly, can you tell them where they can access EMIS?
Right. So you're going to go to our TRSL website, and you're going to click on Employer Access. Then you're going to log in with your username and password, and that's going to direct you over to our EMIS site. And that, like Jeff said, that's where you're going to be able to view or update or pull reports and things like that.
Right. We're going to, through the course of the day, cover a lot of the programs within EMIS, how to correct member records, certified service credit. But we're going to start with just some reports that you might not know about. There's a reports tab in EMIS. If you go there, you're going to get a long list of reports. We're not going to cover all of them today, but we're going to cover some that employers might not know about, and can hopefully make their job a little bit easier if they can use these reports. So let's start with this enrolled, not reported. And I always say that we weren't very creative when we came up with names for these reports. They tell you exactly what they are. This report is going to give you a list of people that are enrolled in TRSL and didn't have earnings or contributions reported for a particular month. So Kelly, can you tell them why this would be useful, when they might want to pull it, maybe how often they might want to pull it?
Right. This is a report you can pull monthly. You want to make sure that you will pull it by system code, and then you would put in the actual month. You want to use the month that you have just submitted your salary file for. If you put in the month after that, it's going to pull up every record that you have. But basically, you want to pull in this report when you're looking for people that might need to be terminated. And I mean, there might be another reason why people are enrolled in your system and not being reported, maybe some leave without pay. We'll talk about that later. But basically, this is a good time to pull this report if you're looking for people that possibly need to be terminated.
Yeah, I think this is a good report to pull maybe at the beginning of a semester.
Right.
Because you might not know that somebody, maybe they didn't give you notice they weren't coming back. They just don't show up for the beginning of the semester. So you haven't terminated them, but also you're not paying them. So they're going to show up on your exception report as enrolled, not reported. This can help you identify people that possibly just need to be terminated.
Yes.
And we have kind of a sister report to this, is the reporting not enrolled. Again, the name tells you exactly what it is. This is going to give you a list of people that do have earnings and contributions reported to TRSL without an enrollment. So Sharon, can you give them a little bit of detail about this, like how often they might want to pull it, what it can help them with?
Well, this is a report you'll probably want to pull monthly. It's basically a subset of your exceptions report. Whenever you go under that reports menu and you choose reporting not enrolled report option, you'll enter the system code 4 in the current fiscal year and hit select, and that report will come up, and it'll show you everyone who so far we have earnings and contributions data reported, but we don't have a corresponding enrollment for that reporting period. So that may indicate someone that you may just need to enroll, possibly. But before you automatically go and enroll that person, you want to make sure that that person is truly eligible to contribute, which we'll talk about eligibility requirements in a few slides from now. But, you know, it could possibly be someone just to enroll, but it may be some other issue. So you want to look at those records carefully.
Right. And we know that there's a lot going on at the beginning of a school year, beginning of a semester. It's easy to, get behind on enrollments.
Yes.
If you do get behind on enrollments, this report can help you identify people that need to be enrolled.
Without having to pull that big exceptions report.
Right. So these two reports, not everybody on here on this report and the previous report, they might not all need to be enrolled or terminated, but a pretty good number of them probably will be. So this will help you identify people that you need to possibly enroll or terminate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this ending drop participation report, again, no really mystery of what it does. You can query, based on a month. It's going to tell you who's scheduled to come out of drop during that month. You can do it for future months, past months. Why is it important for employers to keep track of when people are coming out of drop?
Right. You want to make sure that you're following and tracking and pulling this report often. It's better to set someone up coming out of drop and start those contributions, turning those contributions back on, so that you're getting those contributions in a timely manner. If you're waiting and not turning those contributions back on, that means you're going to have to go and get those contributions back payments from those employees. And it's better to turn them on in a timely manner than have to go back and get all those contributions from back payments.
Right, exactly. We don't have a situation where somebody comes out of drop, employer maybe isn't aware of it.
Yes.
Doesn't start withholding contributions. A few months go by, and now they've got to get that money back from that employee.
Right.
So this report will help you avoid that situation.
Mm-hmm. And this report, you can go back several months if you need to. You can go future months.
Yeah, it's just a good way to track when people are coming out of drop and knowing what you have to do once they do come out of drop.
Right.
Now, this report is kind of similar to that. When members eligible to retire, this is going to tell you who's eligible to retire for whatever fiscal year that you choose to query for. And I know, Sharon, this is one of your favorite reports.
Yes, because, here at the retirement system, most of us who work here, we inevitably get a call or a question from an employer, from an agency asking, hey, do you have a report that lists everyone who's currently in drop with my agency so that we can kind of stay on top of that? And we don't directly have that specific type of report, but this report, members eligible to retire, will give you that information. In addition to people who are eligible to retire, it'll also have everyone who is currently in drop and anyone who is currently working after drop with your agency. So the ones who are currently in drop, it'll show their status as drop member, and it'll show their participation dates, their starting date, and their projected ending date. And those that are working after drop, it'll show their status as active drop, and it'll show you the dates that they were in the drop program. So to me, it's very useful because unlike the previous report where you're querying 1 month at a time, this report gives you everybody all on one report.
Yeah, they can help employers for possible succession planning, just knowing who's eligible to retire when they might be leaving.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of this report.
So the last report that we want to go over is a new report. And this is really important for higher ed agencies. This ORP to TRSL election eligibility report. So to kind of understand this report, let's talk about ORP a little bit, which we'll get into more detail a little bit later. But in the past, when somebody joined ORP, they were in ORP forever. There was no way to get out of ORP.
Right.
Last summer, a law was passed allowing certain groups of people the option to leave ORP and join TRSL. This report allows you to identify those people who are in ORP that are eligible to leave ORP. So there's really two groups of people they can leave. One of them have a 1-year window. The other group has a 5-year window. The 1-year window people, their window closes on June 30th, 2025. And we'll cover that in more detail a little bit later, but that's going to be a common theme today is that deadline is approaching June 30th. It's a hard deadline. This report allows you to identify any of your employees in ORP who can leave. And you can, if you want to pull all of them, both the 1-year window and the 5-year window people, you can do that. If you just want to identify the 1-year window or the 5-year window people, there's different options for how you want to pull the report, but you can look at people that are eligible to leave, people that are not eligible to leave, people that have already left, people whose window is approaching closure, and that's within 2 years of closing. So I want to emphasize this report because it's new and it's really time sensitive with that June 30th, 2025 deadline coming up. So going back to EMIS,
Right.
when you're navigating in EMIS, and this isn't as important for higher ed because there's really only 2 system codes.
Right.
But when we do this presentation for other audiences, there's other system codes. But higher ed has 4 and 6.
Right.
So there's not a lot of detail to give on this, but system 4, that's our regular defined benefit plan. System 6, that's ORP.
And when you're navigating EMIS, if you start out on the member summary screen, you don't have to put in a system code. But if you are in other screens, sometimes it may ask you for the system code, like if you're doing a correction or things like that. But it's basically just system 4 for higher ed.
Yeah, you're not going to have the screens that you would have in system 4 for somebody that's in system 6.
Right. Yeah, system 6, you don't.
You're not going to have the same problems navigating as some of our other audiences have.
Right. Right.
So you've kind of introduced EMIS. What is it? Where is it? Some of the things you can do in it. I guess the next question is, how does somebody get access to it? Right. Well, we have a form for that. And as Sharon was saying, these form numbers correspond to our indexes. Index 1 talks about getting access to EMIS authorized contacts. Form 1, our very first form,
Yes.
corresponds to getting access to EMIS.
And all of our forms, a lot of our forms, we usually can take a fax and a scanned or emailed copy. There are a handful of forms though where we absolutely have to have the original, and Form 1 is one of those. You'll see on the upper top, the top half of this form in the black box where it says submit original only. So this one, the forms where it's an original form required, it has to be an original with original ink signatures, no electronic signatures, no scanned copies, no emails. We have to have the original, either mailed to us or hand carried.
Right. And this form also has to be signed by the agency head or agency head designee.
Mhm.
Yes. And in addition to the agency head or agency head designee, they sign at the very bottom of Section 3. In Section 2, where you're adding new employer personnel to be TRSL contacts or authorized signers, you want to make sure if they're going to have access rights beyond just inquiry rights, that person also signs in the appropriate space in Section 2.
Right. And at the bottom of Section 2, if you're needing to delete somebody's access, you want to list those people as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, and you see those check boxes. There's a checkbox really for each program in EMIS that they can get access to.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to go through them one by one, but they are listed on the back of the form with a description of what each program does. And when you're filling them out, if you're trying to determine, hey, who should have access to what, this describes the programs, so you can kind of know what access you're giving to people and who should have what access.
Right.
So another form, kind of a sister form to the Form 1, is this Form 1 EDC. And where the last form was used to tell us who should have access to different programs within EMIS, this form is used to tell us who the contacts at your agency are. Everybody should have an agency head. Everybody should have a retirement contact.
At a minimum.
Yes, we recommend more than those.
Right.
Those
Everything
two are
that's
required.
applies, yes.
Yeah. There's a whole list of position titles on here. You would fill out as many as are relevant for your agency. Again, original form, same as the Form 1. We can't accept copies, faxes, electronic signatures, or scans. What's different about this form, though, is that the agency head is not required to sign it.
Right, just someone who already is an authorized signer for your agency that is on file with us.
Right.
Can sign this. Yes.
Now, employers might be wondering who's currently listed as their contacts and who currently has access, to which programs in EMIS. If an employer doesn't know that, how can they figure that out?
Right. If you're in EMIS, you can hover over the Employers tab, scroll down to Employer Contacts, and it's going to pull up your employer contacts. It's going to list them first. It's going to have their title, their position, their name, their phone number, their extension, email address. And then after that, you have the update permissions. And we've had to redact a bunch of information, but it is going to list that person's name with the permissions that they have. Again, if you need to update your employer contacts, you're going to use Form 1 EDC. And if you need to update your permissions, you're going to use Form 1.
And we ask employers to review the screen often and kind of keep it up to date as job duties change or turnover occurs in your office. This should be updated so that whoever needs to have access to do their TRSL duties actually has access to do it, and we have the right people listed for us to get into contact with.
Mm-hmm. And if you're viewing your contact screen and you see that there are names on there for personnel who no longer work for your agency or whose job duties have changed and they no longer need that access that you need to remove, you would do that with that Form 1. That section of Form 1 right just above Section 3 where it asks you to provide information for those that need to be deleted. And again, that Form 1 would still need to be signed by your agency head to remove individuals.
Right, because keep in mind, what you're seeing is what we're seeing. And if your information changes, we're not able to contact you because the information is incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So Index 2 of our procedures manual talks about TRSL membership. So we're going to be talking about who to enroll, how do you determine somebody's eligible. For higher ed, it's a little bit easier than what we deal with K-12.
Right.
But this is going to be, the eligible positions for you guys is going to be all your unclassified employees. Well, we start off with the position.
Right.
They're unclassified. Then we look at if there's a visa issue, how do visas play into membership eligibility?
Yes, so if they're a visa holder, you want to make sure that they're not an F series or J series, because F series and J series are not eligible for enrollment. The only exception is a J1 visa. If they're a J1 visa holder, they could be eligible.
And I know that there's some people in the audience who have lab schools as well. So your lab school employees, anybody other than a bus driver or maintenance personnel they're going to meet the position criteria for being eligible for TRSL membership.
Right.
Then the same visa rules apply.
Exactly.
And then once you determine they're eligible based on their position, there's no visa issues, then you got to look at their employment status.
Right.
So for higher ed, they have to be working at least half of what they consider full-time or more than 20 hours per week. If you're working 20 hours or less than 50% effort, those are considered part-time, would not be eligible. And also they cannot be seasonal or temporary.
Right.
So this is kind of the starting point for determining eligibility is their position eligible? Are there any visa issues that would prohibit them from being eligible?
Right.
Are they not considered part-time, seasonal, temporary? If so, you would enroll them no matter what.
Right.
Now,
There are exceptions to the rule.
right.
Always exceptions.
People that are part-time, seasonal, and temporary, there's a 5-year rule and a 10-year rule. Now, for For higher ed, that typically that 10-year rule is what we're going to be looking at. The 5-year rule is really only for,
Lab schools.
yeah, for this audience would be for lab schools.
Right.
But for everybody else, if a person is part-time, seasonal, or temporary, they would have to have 10 years of service credit for eligibility purposes in order to be eligible for membership.
Right.
Again, we're talking about W-2 employees. If they have, 10 is kind of that magic number.
Right, and we don't round. If their eligibility credit we have is 9.95, and if all those years are certified, they would not meet that 10-year rule. But if somebody's on the borderline of that eligibility, that 10-year, probably reach out to us if you have a new hire or someone who's potentially eligible and you're not sure, reach out to us because we'll try to get those years certified to make sure if they're going to meet that 10-year rule.
Right. They could even have money in the current year. They could have worked somewhere else during the same fiscal year. That service credit hasn't been posted yet.
That might make them eligible.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody's
Yeah.
close, call us and we'll help you figure it out.
And again, this 10-year rule is only if someone is seasonal, temporary, or they're working 20 hours a week or less, or they're considered less than 50% effort for your agency.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once somebody reaches that 10-year plateau,
They're vested.
yeah, they're going to be eligible no matter what.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
about are they eligible, part-time, seasonal, temporary, whatever. Like, once they get 10, they're going to be enrolled no matter what.
Right.
Right.
Adjuncts, whatever.
Now, there's always another layer.
I guess we should add that what we're talking about here are non-retirees, because sometimes it is confusing. A lot of agencies get confused. They're thinking, because when it comes to retirees return to work, it's totally different rules. So this is all about non-retirees.
Right. We're going to cover return to work in a section later
Later
this
on.
morning, but yeah, good point, because there are different rules for retirees versus non-retirees.
Right.
So this is all for non-retirees.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's always like another layer. The secondary employment is another layer you have to think about.
Right.
So if somebody's part-time, seasonal, temporary, say they don't have the 10 years, so normally they wouldn't be eligible. Well, you have to look and see, are they working somewhere else? They have primary employment somewhere else, and you're hiring them, in a part-time, seasonal, temporary capacity. If you're paying them a W-2 and they have primary employment somewhere else,
With another TRSL agency.
right?
Yes.
Yes. So you would want to pull them up in EMIS, look at their records, see, hey, they're employed with wherever another, they have other active employment.
Right.
You would enroll them in secondary.
Right.
Let's mention ORP again regarding,
Eligibility.
Eligibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the vesting requirements for ORP are different. Like, they don't have the same part-time, seasonal, temporary criteria. ORP can be offered to people that are part-time, seasonal, temporary. So if somebody is in ORP and you're hiring them on a part-time, seasonal, temporary basis, you would continue to just report them to ORP. There's always more layers.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
If they're W-2, yes, keep reporting them to ORP. If they're 1099, well, there's certain criteria that we're going to talk about on the next slide. That same criteria also applies to, regular secondary employment, non-ORP.
Right.
If you're paying somebody via 1099 and you're trying to figure out, oh, do I need to enroll them as secondary because they're primary somewhere else? Take a look at that criteria.
And again, non-retirees.
Yeah, this is all non-retirees. So, Kelly, you want to go through the criteria for 1099 payments and what would make that
Right.
TRSL eligible?
Yes, again, we're talking about secondary enrollment. If they're primary with another state agent, another TRSL agency, and you're enrolling them as secondary or contemplating whether you need to enroll them as secondary. If they're being paid on a 1099 contract and it's more than $1,000, or for an individual contract, you would enroll them as secondary. Or if they're on individual contracts that are $1,000 or less, and those individual contracts exceed $15,000 in a fiscal year, then you're going to post the excess of the anything in excess of $15,000. That would be considered earnable comp, so you would report those earnings. And again, if the person is not enrolled somewhere else and they're on a 1099 only, then you're not going to enroll that person. It's not earnable comp. And again, we're talking about non-retirees.
I see we have a question. Somebody's asking, if somebody's in a permanent position for 5 years, then move to a temporary position, do they maintain eligibility to remain in TRSL similar to ACA, or do they lose eligibility and have to be removed?
Because ACA is Affordable Care Act, maybe it's insurance.
Yeah, perhaps, but so if they're in a permanent position for 5 years, so they were eligible for that position, and then they switch to a temporary position, if they don't have the 10 years.
And they're still working for a higher ed agency.
Yeah, we're talking about higher ed. If they don't have the 10 years and they go to a part-time seasonal temporary position, they're no longer eligible.
Right.
The only way they could be eligible is if they're also going to be working at another agency full-time.
Right.
Where it would be a primary, secondary
Or the lab school.
situation, yeah.
Yeah, but this question is from a higher ed person.
Right, so we're figuring out, it's staying higher ed, yes.
Yeah, they would not be eligible for primary employment in a temporary position unless they have the 10-year.
I guess the only exception would be if this is about lab school situation. And it's they've got 5 years and they're changing to a temporary lab school teacher. Then they can.
Right, if the person meets the definition of a classroom teacher,
Teacher.
which lab schools, for this audience, lab schools would be the only
Right.
scenario that could apply.
Right. So, I would encourage that person who's submitted that question, if you have a specific person, specific employee, where this situation is occurring, please reach out to us individually and we can research that record for you and give you a more definitive answer.
Now, something that's, I guess, kind of unique to higher ed is the adjuncts,
Right.
adjunct professors. So these are people that are part-time instructors, part-time professors. Their course load changes from semester to semester. So these can be kind of tricky to determine if they're eligible or not, if they meet the eligibility requirements, because you have to look at it really on a semester by semester basis.
Right.
Especially if they don't already have 10 years in teachers.
Right. If they don't have the 10 years, then
Of
you
eligibility.
got to be very careful, each semester to make sure that they
Right.
still are eligible.
Right. They might be eligible one semester and not the next semester.
Yeah. Once they meet that 10 years, they're eligible no matter what.
Right.
But if they don't have the 10 years, they have to work at least 50% of what they consider full-time, not be seasonal temporary, or meet that secondary criteria.
Yes.
So let's kind of assume that at this point, an employer is hiring somebody, they've determined that they do meet the eligibility requirements. Now they're actually ready to enroll them. So what documents do they want to include in their hiring packet?
Right.
Well, we have a paper enrollment form, a Form 2. This is kind of optional if employers want to use it for their own use, to kind of gather all that information on a single piece of paper and keep it for their own records, and then use that to do the online enrollment.
Mhm.
But if employers do choose to use that Form 2, there's no need to send that form to us.
Right.
If you're doing an online enrollment, we don't need the Form 2. The only reason you should send us a Form 2 is if you're unable to process that enrollment online for some reason.
Right, that typically that person would be enrolled online, but because of maybe some type of status or issue, the online enrollment's not going through.
Right.
That would be the only time to send that to us.
So the next form would be the forfeiture of benefits form. During the enrollment process, the employer is going to have to answer a few questions, based on when this person was first eligible for membership.
Right.
There's a couple of questions they have to answer, and the way they answer those questions is going to determine whether that forfeiture of benefits form is required or not.
Mhm.
If it is required, employers should just hold that form in their own files. Do not send it to us. If for some reason we need it later, we can request it, but don't send that to us. The next form is this 2SS, the Social Security form. Employers might be wondering if they're still have to send this form to us based on the changes recently with Social Security. where there's no longer those offsets.
Yeah.
We've modified this form. It's shorter now.
Mhm.
So if, employer has a stack of copies of their old form, you can dispose of those, start using the new form. But yes, we do ask that you still use this form, and this one, send us a copy, they keep the original.
Mhm.
And the last form they should include in their packet is the beneficiary form, the Form 3. This one, we ask that when you give this to your employees, instruct them to return that form directly to us instead of sending it back to the employers,
Right.
where there could be a delay, it could get lost, anything could happen. And as employers, you don't really want to be the middleman in that process. If they do send it back to the employers, we ask that they send it back to us immediately. Don't wait until they have a stack of them and send them all at once. Just ideally, the employee should be sending that directly to us.
Right.
So they're hiring somebody, they've identified that yes, they are eligible, they filled out their paperwork. Now they're actually ready to do the enrollment. So Kelly, can you kind of walk them through or show them where they go to do that enrollment and some of the timeframes involved?
Right. Again, you're in EMIS and you go under the updates tab and you can click on enrollments. And we're going to go over, how to submit the enrollment, but there are deadlines for active members. You want to enroll them within 60 days. And retirees, it's more critical, so you want to enroll them within 30 days. Also, when you get ready to enroll someone, make sure that you have their actual Social Security card or you are for sure what the Social Security number is, so that when you're enrolling them, you're using the correct social. And again, make sure that you're enrolling them with an actual Social Security number and not a dummy SSN when you're enrolling.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of emphasize the importance of getting that Social Security number correct at the time of enrollment.
Right.
This is a screen of what the enrollment screen looks like for somebody who's never been enrolled in TRSL before. You just go enter their personal information. But Sharon, you want to kind of emphasize the importance of having that correct SSN?
Yes, from time to time, we will see where maybe an employer has enrolled someone and then they'll put an enrollment date and a term date the same date because maybe they realize that they entered the wrong Social Security number when they did the online enrollment in our system. So they caught themselves and then they do a new enrollment with the correct social, and we'll see two records in our system where it's the same name, same date of birth, but and two different Social Security numbers, and the Social Security numbers are just a couple of digits off. So we realized one record was the incorrect record, one is the good one. The employer may think, oh, putting an enrollment and a term date the same date, that takes care of the issue, but that doesn't take care of the issue on our end. On our end, in our database, that bad SSN creates a record in our system, a record where we're expecting earnings and contributions to be reported. So what we want to do is if we want to be able to delete that bad SSN record, but we can't do that unless we're notified that is that record was entered with an incorrect social and that it should be deleted. So we can't take any action without verification from your end. So if you ever do find where you have entered a Social Security number and it's incorrect, I know your first gut instinct is to go ahead and put a term date out there real quick. Instead of doing that, what we want you to do is contact your assigned liaison or one of us up here immediately. Let us know that you enrolled someone with the incorrect Social Security number. We're going to take steps. We'll let you know any additional information we need from you. And we're going to take steps to delete that bad record. And one of the other reasons why we want that bad record deleted is in the future, that bad SSN record that you entered could be somebody's Social Security number in the future. And when another employer goes to enroll someone in the future, they can't enroll them in our system because we've already got that SSN in our system with somebody else's name. So that creates a whole slew of issues. So we just want to urge you to make sure, double check the SSN when you're entering, when you're doing the online enrollments. Always compare from the Social Security card instead of anything that the employee might have, filled out on a form. And if you do find that you've caught yourself with a bad SSN enrollment, notify us immediately.
Yeah, that also applies to if you enroll somebody and then realize right away that they're not eligible.
Right.
Yes,
Don't just terminate them. Let us know. We can delete that enrollment.
yes,
Like once an enrollment's in there and, you enter an enrollment and termination in the same day or one day apart, whichever it is, that enrollment's in our system. Even if you don't report any money, the year's going to close. It's going to show an employment history. We're going to think that person was employed for that time.
Mhm.
It's going to affect their service accrual date. There's just a lot of things on our end that need to be cleaned up when somebody's enrolled in error.
right,
So just terminating them doesn't fix the problem on our end.
right.
So let us know, and then we can fix it. And we promise we won't be mad at you if you.
Right, we will not
something
fuss at you.
happens.
Right. We're totally here to help you
Right.
with anything, even if it's, the wrong enrollment date or the wrong month of contract. Just let us know.
Yeah, those are really easy things for us to fix
Right.
if we know to fix them.
Right,
Now, if you do the enrollment and then you get this message, ORP status exists. Again, in the past, that meant that this person could not join TRSL, had to continue in ORP. You should submit a Form 16. Now, though, with that change where people can leave, certain people can leave ORP. If you get this message, I guess two things could be happening.
Right.
You could just enroll this person by accident, and they might be trying to leave ORP, they might not be. If they really are trying to leave ORP, you wouldn't do an online enrollment for that person. You would do a Form 2TR, which we'll cover in a minute, but that's the process to enroll somebody in TRSL that's in ORP.
Right.
The other scenario would be, wait, they're not trying to leave ORP. The employer just made a mistake by trying to enroll them in TRSL instead of submitting the Form 16. So if you get this message, first thing you got to figure out is, hey, what is this person really trying to do?
Right. So either way, it's a form.
Right. If they really are trying to leave ORP, I guess the first thing is to determine,
can they do that?
Yeah, can they do that?
Right. Are they eligible?
Are they in the group that can leave? We've made it easy for you to figure out whether they can or can't, because we've added a field to our member summary screen, this ORP to TRSL election eligibility field. You can see it in green text here. In this example, this person's in a 1-year window. It closes June 30th, 2025. People in a 5-year window, again, that same field is on the member summary screen. It's going to tell you they're in the 5-year window. It's going to tell you when that window closes. Now, everybody in the 1-year window, their window closes all the same time, June 30th, 2025. People in the 5-year window, they don't all have one date that they all close on.
Right.
Their window starts on their ORP first eligible date, 5 years from that date. So everybody in the 5-year window has a different ending date. The ending date is on the member summary screen, so it's easy for employers to see. So if somebody is actually, you get that message, somebody is trying to leave ORP and join TRSL, this is the form that's required for them to do it. This TRSL, the Form 2TR, election to join TRSL after ORP participation.
Right.
Again, this is one of those forms that we need the original of. We can't accept any copies or faxes or scans. We need the actual original form. This form is a little bit different from most of our forms in that it's 2 pages.
Yes.
The
Front and back.
Yeah. The employee is going to fill out the first page. Employer fills out the second page. There's a lot of details on this form, a lot of questions the employer has to answer. There's a lot of, you want to make sure that this form is filled out correctly. Put it that way.
Right.
The employee has to initial 5 items on the front page. They can't just do a check mark. We don't want to reject any of these forms, but we have to have them filled out correctly in order for us to process that enrollment. So please, look at these closely before you submit them. And just keep in mind that June 30th, 2025 deadline for anybody in the 1-year group.
Right, and you want to submit that form together, even though the employer fills out the back and the employee fills out the front. You want to submit it together. And like Jeff says, it is very time sensitive. If there is something wrong with the form and we have to return it to you, then it's got to be filled out again, and we have to have it in our office. Deadline is June 30th.
We have a question too. Do it down.
Someone's asking, will a reminder of the 1-year window deadline be sent out? Yeah.
To answer the question about a reminder of the 1-year window, we are sending periodic reminders to you all as the employers. The members themselves or the participants will not be getting a reminder. So we do encourage you guys to pull that report that Jeff showed you, the election eligibility report, and just kind of be mindful of disseminating that information or maybe reminding people that that window could be closing soon.
And at this point, we're going to take just a brief break to switch up panelists before we cover ORP. All right, we're back. Jessica Trosclair has joined us to cover ORP. This is Index 16 of our Employer Procedures Manual. So I guess a good place to start with ORP is just what is ORP?
It? Yeah, ORP stands for Optional Retirement Plan, and it is very much what it sounds like. It is an alternative to the regular retirement system. It's available to unclassified employees within the higher ed arena. It was established in 1990, and it was really designed to accommodate just sort of the nature of higher ed employees and to provide in a way for them to accrue some sort of a benefit, even if their career takes them to a different state or they're in a position where they may not be eligible to vest in the regular pension system. So it is portable and specific to higher ed scenarios.
So we have the regular plan, defined benefit plan, and the defined contribution plan.
Correct.
And I guess this kind of goes over how they're different.
Right. So there's really two big differences. The first you can kind of tell by the name. So with the regular pension system, that is a defined benefit, meaning that the benefit is based on a formula. With the ORP, it's more like a 401k. So it's a defined contribution, meaning the benefits are going to be dependent on the contribution balance for that individual participant. The other big difference between the two plans is the way the investing happens. So with the TRSL regular plan, all of those employer and employee contributions are sort of piled together. The retirement system invests them on behalf of our membership, and then we utilize those gains to pay out those lifetime benefits. With the ORP accounts, the individual participant is actually controlling their investments. So they're vested right away. That is their contributions and sort of their vehicle to drive to get what they can out of it over the course of their career.
And who are our current carriers?
Yeah, so we've really had the same three carriers since the plan's inception. There have been a number of name changes, but it's still Voya, PIA, and Corebridge. Corbridge, most recently, it was AIG, and I believe Voya was VALIC. Again, the individuals are going to be driving their own investments. They're going to be picking one of these carriers, and then through that carrier, they're going to handle everything related to the funds and this account.
So we talked a little bit earlier when we covered eligibility. We briefly got into, ORP has different requirements from regular plan. Can you go into a little bit more detail about who is eligible for ORP?
Definitely. Yeah. So we talked about how the ORP is really created because of the differences in sort of the way higher ed people can be employed. And so one of the big things is that the ORP is available to part-time, seasonal, and temporary employees. So they have to be in an unclassified position, a position that belongs to the teacher's retirement system. They have to be directly employed. Again, that can include part-time, seasonal, or temporary employment. And then from there, when we're talking about eligibility, we would look at the service credit that the participant has in the teacher's retirement system, if any. So as long as they're not vested, then they could be offered the choice of the ORP at any point in time. And then you could have a scenario where someone is vested, but you are their first higher education employment. So at that point, they could also, they have a time frame, but they could also elect to join the ORP from there.
Now, we've kind of touched on this, until someone recently, when somebody was in ORP, they were in ORP forever.
Right.
Now, people have certain groups of people have a chance to leave ORP.
Right. So with that window, or I should say that window is the only exception. Once that window closes, ORP is still an irrevocable election. So after June 30th, when the majority of the individuals, those in the one-year group, when their election window closes, then they're going to remain in ORP, even if they change employers, even if they change positions. With Act 109, this is just giving them that temporary time frame to make that decision to leave. Some have done it, some aren't, but if they don't make that election, then they're always going to be in ORP, even once they switch, or if they switch to K-12 or a state agency.
So there's a 60-day, for that 60-day, the importance of 60 days.
Sure.
You kind of talk about what.
Yeah, this kind of aligns with the 60 days that you have for regular TRSL members, kind of to give you that time to get the onboarding process completed. If a participant makes the election within their first 60 days of hire, then their effective date, the date that they're going to be essentially enrolled in the plan, is going to be backdated to the date of hire. If you have someone who makes the decision outside of the 60 days, maybe they wait a year, maybe they just didn't turn the form in on time and it's the 65th day, then the effective date is going to be the first of the month, and the month is going to be determined by the signature date. So in that scenario, their enrollment becomes sort of future dated only. And this does play into the reporting for you guys. So we have recently started sending out acknowledgement letters to both the participants and to you all, so you can know definitively what that effective date is.
Yeah, so that 60-day determines the date, but it also has to do with
Right.
where the money goes.
Correct. Yeah. So anyone who made the election within the 60 days, all of their contributions, all of their salary should be reported under System 6, under the ORP account. If you had enrolled them in the teacher's plan first because you weren't sure what decision they were going to make, then we would expect you to perform a contribution correction, remove those funds from System 4, and then report it on your next ORP file. For those who make the election outside of the 60 days, then again, that's going to be prospective only. So anything that was earned prior to that ORP effective date should be reported under System 4, like normal. And then going forward, based on that effective date, you'll start reporting it to ORP. And now individuals can choose, if they have money in the TRSL account, they can make the election to transfer those funds to their ORP account once everything is set up. If they make that decision, only their contributions will transfer. So only their employee contributions will move over. TRSL would retain the employer contributions that were prior to that 60-day election.
So I guess the question is, the employers submit those ORP contributions to us. What happens to them when they get here?
Yeah, so we're really just a flow-through agency of these funds. Participants are not considered members or they won't be retirees of our system. So as soon as we get the contributions from you, from the employer, we sort of parse out the different components of the employer contributions and the admin rate from the employee contributions, and then we immediately transfer them to the carrier. So as soon as we get the funds in-house, the portion of it that is transferable is immediately sent to the individual person's ORP account. They can almost immediately see it. These two charts just show you sort of a breakdown of the employer contributions, because of course you guys have that shared UAL component in there. And then as I just sort of briefly mentioned, the admin fee is currently paid by the members. So their 8% has a 0.05 deducted. They get 14.15% transferred to their account.
And there's a limit to the amount of how much somebody can contribute to ORP in a calendar year, right?
Yes. So the ORP follows a lot of IRC guidelines that are, of course, different than the pension system. One of them is this contribution limit, which is based on a calendar year, something important to keep in mind. For 2025, the limit is $70,000. We do send you guys sort of a courtesy notice when an individual has reached their limit. But it is always a good idea for you guys to track this, make sure you're kind of keeping up with it, because once they hit that limit, neither employee or employer contributions should be submitted.
Now, say an employer, has somebody in ORP and they terminate employment. What should the employer do at that time?
Really, there's not a lot. So, there's not a whole lot on the enrollment side for you guys either. It's just the form. This is very different from our regular members in that you're not submitting enrollments, you're not submitting certification and things of that nature. With terminations, it's kind of the same thing. We don't expect you to submit a term date online. We don't maintain any employment history. What's most important is that you update your HR system, you update your database so that you are not trying to report this person any longer. You wouldn't want to report zeros or anything like that. Once the individual reaches out to their carrier and they initiate a distribution request, then at that point in time, the carrier is going to reach out to me. I may reach out to you and request a term date or to confirm whether all of the contributions have been reported thus far. If you don't hear from me, that means we just don't need anything from you. So there isn't anything to remit. There's no paper form. You don't have to give me any kind of notice. Just make sure to update your own system. So if we do need it, you have the information there.
And I don't see any questions. Oh, here we go. One question came in.
Should we use the 14.15% as the rate? Yes. You should. So that's going to be the 70,000 based on, that's again, the limit of what's going into their ORP account. So you're not going to include that UAL portion. It's just going to be the contributions that are specifically tied to that participant's record. And you can always go into EMIS and see the breakdown of what has been reported for them.
All right. If no other ORP questions, we're going to take another super quick break just to switch out panelists.
Thanks, you guys.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right, we're back, and Sharon has rejoined us. So we're going to cover Index 4, which is really one of our biggest indexes. This deals with the monthly, salary and earnings contribution reporting and how to correct those. So I guess just kind of a heads up, this is gonna be a big index.
But it is one of my favorite indexes. It's has a bunch of special reporting, like Jeff said, and it's one of my favorite that I share with my employers when I train.
Yeah, there's a lot of information packed
Yes.
into this index. So I guess when we first start talking about, this monthly contribution report, let's look at contribution rates. You gotta know what percent.
How much?
So if we look at current year, for higher ed is 20.88. Looking for next year, 2026, it's 20.33. There's an election can happen at the end of this month, a constitutional amendment that could have a bearing on that employer rate. If it changes, we'll restate that and get that information out to y'all. But as of now, the rate for next year would be 20.33 for higher ed. So when we talk about, this monthly salary file, pretty basic things know what earnings should be included in it, right? Not everything that gets paid out is earnable compensation. There's a definition in statute of what is earnable compensation. It's basically the wages paid by the member, during the full normal working time in a TRSL eligible position.
Right.
That's anything that meets the definition of earnable compensation is reported to us as actual earnings. So just a few basics. Of course, we operate on a fiscal year basis, July 1st through June 30th. Contribution reports and payments are due by the 15th of each month. The payment is actually due on the 5th and is considered late if it's not received by the 15th. That's when interest would start accruing. And we expect earnings to be reported in the year that they were accrued.
Right. Really important for any agencies who have 9-month academic employees that are paid over a 12-month period. You want to make sure that all the earnings they earn for that fiscal year are reported in the right fiscal year for TRSL purposes.
Right, because service credits earned on a fiscal year basis. So those earnings need to be in the year they were earned, so they get the right service credit for that year.
Right. And just to reiterate that it is due by the 15th. So if the 15th falls on a weekend or a holiday, if you're submitting after that, then it is late.
Right. So when we talk about earnable compensation, sometimes it's easier to identify things that are not earnable compensation because some things are excluded in statute.
Right.
So let's go over some of the most common ones that we see. Payment in lieu of unused sick or annual leave. When somebody terminates, and an employer maybe pays out a leave balance.
Right.
That is not earnable comp.
That's usually the 300 hours of annual leave.
Yeah.
Some agencies might also pay out 200 hours of sick leave, if somebody's retiring or something.
Yeah, that's one of the more common ones that we see where employers have to come back and do a prior correction to remove those earnings because they will say, oh, we paid out sick leave and everything.
Right.
Wasn't earnable comp. And we've talked about the 1099 payments. We're not going through all those again, but
Right.
They're here.
Yes. Any kind of like lump sum discontinuation of contractual services, like a severance packet or something, that's not earnable comp either if it's paid in lump sum.
Right. So let's go over a few more, I guess, basic definitions. When we're talking about on a monthly basis for that monthly, salary file,
Right.
what do we mean by full-time earnings?
Right. Full-time earnings is anything the person could have earned in that full month working at 100% effort. For example, if someone is on leave without pay, their actual earnings may be reduced, but that full-time earnings should not be reduced. It should reflect what they could have earned for that whole month. Even if they're part-time, working at percent effort, we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's what they could have earned working 100% effort for the full month.
Yeah, we see this a lot with adjuncts. Say somebody's working 50% effort,
Right.
Yes.
and they get paid $800, say. Well, $800 would not be their full-time if they're an active
Right.
network 50%, right? It should be, or 1,600.
Yeah.
So their full-time should be reported at 1,600, not what they were actually paid.
Right, because we're working with a computer system, and the computer system doesn't know unless you put it in there, and that's how it's going to calculate estimated service credit.
So we were talking about, employers submitting contributions to us. Well, let's talk about the, sheltered versus unsheltered.
Right.
Because there's, some contributions or should be sheltered, some should be unsheltered. Let's also, I think this is a good, place to mention these numbers. Employers may have seen these in our system before when they're going to enter certain corrections. It doesn't say sheltered or unsheltered. You have a number,
Right.
30 or 10.
Especially on that salary file that gets sent to us each month. It's a lot of numbers.
Right. So maybe you've seen that and didn't know what it meant, or, somebody at your agency knows what it means because
Yeah.
it's coming in, but a lot of people don't know what those numbers mean.
Right.
So 30 corresponds to sheltered, 10 corresponds to unsheltered.
Mhm.
So vast majority of contributions are going to be sheltered, right?
Per member, yes.
Yeah, for members. Active members typically would be sheltered,
Including anybody who's working after drop.
right?
Right.
There's, a few exceptions to that, but for actives, the default is going to be sheltered.
Sheltered.
Things that would be unsheltered if somebody is for an active employee, if they're on workers' comp,
Right.
And they're being paid through a third party. They're not using their own.
right?
sick
There's
leave.
there's no combination of sick and workers' comp.
Right.
If they're using
Individual month.
right, if they're using a combination of leave and workers' comp, that would be reported as sheltered. But if it's all workers' comp, that would be unsheltered. All return to work contributions, unsheltered.
Right.
Yeah, if the retiree is eligible to contribute, it's always going to be unsheltered.
Even the option 2, the ones that are, again, accruing service credit, that is also unsheltered.
And of course, employer contributions are unsheltered. UCR payments, these people on military leave
Right.
that are, paying outside of their payroll system, those would be unsheltered. So each month, employers are required to send us that monthly salary and contribution report. Really, the preferred way for them to send it is via file submission and EMIS. If they do submit it that way, they're going to get a report immediately telling them basically what happened.
Yeah.
Was the file accepted? Was the file rejected? If it was rejected, why was it rejected? What records caused it to be rejected? I guess that's something we want to emphasize, that typically
Right.
when you perform an action in EMIS, you're going to get some sort of feedback
Right.
telling you what happened.
Right. Whether you're doing an enrollment, a termination, a correction, submitting a report, updating data, whatever you're doing, it's either going to give you a message or a report. And you want to be mindful to check that, because sometimes you might be doing something and think you've submitted something or corrected something, and you get a red error message. It's telling you it didn't go through. And sometimes it will tell you it went through, don't process it again. But just be mindful to look at those messages.
And for this report, make sure your pop-up blocker's off,
Exactly.
because you're going to get a report opening up in a separate window.
Right. That's all of our reports.
Like I said, this is really important for whoever is submitting this file. Maybe that person is not responsible for, maybe that's all maybe their responsibility ends there. They submit the file, they're done.
Right.
But somebody else there might be responsible for going and clearing any exceptions that were on the file, or rejections, or, so whoever submits that file, get that summary report, that rejection report, give it to whoever who needs to have it to do that next step of the process.
Right.
Now, one thing that changed in the last year regarding rejecting these monthly salary files is we started rejecting files if they contained an ORP participant.
A regular plan file.
Yeah, so if your System 4 DB file contains an ORP participant, that file is going to be rejected.
Right.
The
whole file.
whole file. And you're going to get a report telling you which records or for people that are in ORP that are causing it to be rejected. So you would have to take those people off, resubmit the file.
Right.
Now, you would also want to see those people that you just took off, were they also on your ORP file? Because if they're in ORP, they should be on your ORP file, not your System 4 file.
Right.
So I would recommend, if you're submitting both a regular System 4 file and an ORP file,
Right.
submit the System 4 one first.
Mhm.
That's going to tell you, hey, if you have any ORP people on it, you can take them off and then add them to your ORP file.
Right.
If you submit your ORP file first and these people should be on it, but they're not, you're going to have to remember to, put that data on next month's file. You have to really double them up on the next month's file.
Yes.
Right.
So I think that's a good practice, is do your System 4 one first.
Right.
See if it's rejected for any ORP people. If it is, take them off, add them to your ORP file, then submit your ORP file.
Right. And going a step further, you also want to make sure that you're going into your payroll system and switching that person from a System 4 to a System 6, so it doesn't perpetuate monthly after that.
Right. Appropriate deduction code.
Yes.
Right. If not, you'll be making that same manual correction
Every month.
every month until it's corrected at the source.
Right.
Right.
So let's say we're at the point now where somebody has, submitted their salary contribution file to us. Typically, there's going to be some sort of exception on that report.
Right.
Sometimes we get a report with no exceptions, but the norm is there's usually something on that report that we're not expecting, or something not on the report that we are expecting that creates an exception.
Mhm.
Right.
Or some kind of missing data,
Yeah, or there's something,
some
There's
process
just-
missing. Yeah.
yeah, or the record is just flat out rejected for whatever reason.
Yes.
Right.
So there's two reports available to identify these things. There's a contribution exception report and a salary rejection report. Both of these should really be reviewed shortly after submitting that file. So this should be part of a monthly process. The file submitted, and then you're checking for exceptions and rejections.
Mhm.
So where can employers go to identify their exceptions?
Okay. So after each agency, after they submit their most recent monthly salary file, we recommend that you go into, when you're in the EMIS site, go under the employers menu and choose the employer contribution charges option. When that screen pulls up, you want to put in your system code 4 and the current fiscal year 2025. And that will show you every month so far that your agency has submitted a salary file, what we call our employer contribution charges screen. What you're looking for is for every month that has been reported so far to say report in blue font. That means there's no exceptions, there's no issues for that particular reporting month when it comes to exceptions. But if you see a red error message, that means there are some exceptions that need to be cleared. So you have two ways to pull that report, and both of them are going to be from this contribution charges screen. The first option, we'll go to the next slide. You can click on the most recent month that has that red error message. You click on that red error message. In this case, the most recent month is October for this screenshot. We recently, we're in March, so your most recent salary file might be February. So you might have an error message, an error in February. If that's the case, you'd want to click on the error next to February, if that's what is showing up for your agency. When you click on that red error message for the most recent month, it's going to pull your cumulative report, your exceptions report. It's going to sort the records by Social Security number order and show you what records are being flagged, either for missing information or incorrect information.
Right.
Now, the other option to pull your exceptions report, you're starting from that same screen, that same employer contribution charges screen. Instead of clicking on the most recent month with the red error message, for this report retrieval, under that query records section, after the fiscal year, where it says new custom report help on the left side, Where it says report type, make sure complete report is selected. And for sort selection, you've got 3 different options to sort. You can sort it by social security number, which is the default sort. You can sort it alphabetically by the member's last name, or you can sort it by exception message. If you're going to pull the report through this method, I strongly encourage you to sort by the exception message option, because that will put similar records together. Records that are marked enrolled, not reported will be together. Records marked contribution type invalid will be together, et cetera. So it'll have similar records that might need similar types of corrections together. It may be easier, especially if you're a large agency and you have a lot of exceptions, a very large exceptions report. I think you may find this a little bit easier.
Yeah, and really the best way to not let your exception report get out of control
Is stay on top of enrollments and terminations. So that enrolled, not reported, reported, not enrolled reports we were talking about in the earlier section. If you're staying on top of that, your exceptions report will be all the other stuff.
Right. So, everybody's office works differently.
Yes.
But whoever's responsible for doing enrollments and terminations might not be the person that is responsible for, monitoring this exception report on a monthly basis.
Yeah, like payroll issues or contribution issues. Yeah.
So if you're the person that is, responsible for enrollments and terminations, if you just run those 2 reports we talked about earlier, that reported not enrolled, enrolled not reported, kind of stay on top of that, that's going to help out whoever else is responsible for monitoring this exception report.
Yes, absolutely.
So those are really 2 different ways of pulling some of the same data.
Yes.
But we want to give you options on, how you want to attack these exceptions.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so this is just an example of an exception report, and it's going to look a little bit different than what you're going to see because we removed names and social security numbers. But you'll see in the right-hand column that exception message. That's going to tell you what is the exception for each record. In this case, we have some contribution unreasonable, or for whatever reason, the contribution amount wasn't the standard 8%. Another one, contribution type invalid. Looks like we received unsheltered. We were expecting sheltered. And we've got some enrolled not reported and
Return to work stuff.
yeah.
Right.
Just to let you know, as your agency clears these exceptions, they will come off this report in real time. So your goal is to get your exceptions report down to no remaining records each month. That's ideally what you want to strive for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you're working this, you can kind of run it again and you can see your progress. Hey, it's a lot smaller than it was when I started.
Right. And if you have to take some type of corrective action in our system, you may have to take some kind of corresponding corrective action in your own software. Like that second record in this example report where it says contribution type invalid. If everything was being reported as unsheltered and should have been sheltered, I'm guessing this is maybe an active record, somebody who's not retired. You want to make sure not only to fix it on our end, but to fix it on your software end so that it doesn't keep occurring month after month.
Right. Yeah, if not, you're making these manual corrections each month.
Right. And vice versa. If someone does need to be unsheltered and we don't know about it, you're going to have to let us know so that we can code it as, or to be unsheltered and not be an exception. Right.
So Sharon talked about exception reports. The other thing that employers need to be aware of are these rejections.
Right.
Right. And where can they find their rejections?
Right. When you pull your exceptions report, if you look at the top of it, you'll see a box that says show rejections. And if you don't have any rejections for that fiscal year, that box will not be there. But once that box is there, you can click on that and you'll scroll to the bottom of your exceptions report. And then it'll start with the salary rejections. Unlike the exceptions report, which is in fiscal year order, the salary rejections are in calendar year order. And just like the exceptions report is is different because as you're clearing the exceptions, they are in real time disappearing from that report. But for the salary rejections, even when you reconcile these records, those records are going to be kept indefinitely. So no matter if you pick up, pull the report for last year, those salary rejections are still going to be listed. Once you go into reconcile those rejections, just keep in mind, a rejection is not like an exception. A rejection means that you listed that person on the salary file, you sent that those earnings to that to us, but it did not get allocated to that member's actual account, and so you're going to have to go in and reconcile it.
Right. With the exceptions, that member's record was updated based on that information in the salary file.
Well, we just kind of flagged it as something missing.
Right. It wasn't
Correction needed.
Yeah, it was different from what we were expecting.
Right.
Rejections said, no, we're not accepting this at all. We're not updating this person's record based on this information.
Right.
And this is just a close-up screen of rejections. You can see the error message telling you why these records were rejected. You see a lot of negative money amount disallowed. We don't accept negative amounts. So if you're trying to reduce somebody's earnings, the way to do it would really be to correct the previous months, not to report a negative in the next month.
Right.
Right. And if you see any exception error messages that say pending retirement drop, et cetera, or person in estimated status, that usually indicates somebody who is retiring or retired or entering drop where the agency has attempted to report earnings and contributions more than 1 month past their termination date. So in our system, you can post up to 1 month after. So if those earnings should have been reported, then you may have to move those earnings that were rejected to an earlier month.
Right.
Now, you could have some rejections where everything is zero.
Yes.
So you put in that file that the actual earnings were zero, contributions were zero, full-time was zero, just zeros across the board.
Yes.
The only months you can report zeros across the board for like that are summer months.
Yes.
Right.
June, July, and August.
Yes.
These might not require any action on your part.
Right.
If you're reporting all zeros, well, we didn't accept them, but it was all zeros anyway, so it's not really hurting anything.
Right.
Now you could have somebody that there's a person here with zeros full-time required. It could be that this person's also on the exception report.
Yes.
Because you try to report zeros, they are enrolled. We rejected what you reported because there's no full-time.
Right.
So they would be enrolled, not reported on your exception report as well.
Right. Right. If you have a record on this rejection that's all zeros all the way across, you can usually ignore it because if that record is truly needed, that same Social Security number will be on your exceptions report,
Right.
same reporting month.
Yeah, there'd be some overlap that could be on both reports.
And if you want to prevent all zeros, sometimes some agencies have all zeros reported for someone who's not working for them anymore. You just want to make sure you inactivate that payroll record so that it's not retrieved on your monthly salary file each month.
Right.
If it's that kind of situation.
So kind of fast forward where somebody has submitted their report, they've identified, hey, we've got some exceptions to clear. Now let's talk about how to clear them, right? There's only 3 programs you're going to use to clear exceptions. Contribution correction, that's where you can correct earnings and contributions for the current fiscal year, enrollments, and terminations.
Yeah, and they're all under the updates menu if you have access rights.
Yep. So contribution corrections, like I said, this is how you would correct earnings and contributions for the current year.
Right.
So what type of exceptions would somebody use this program to clear?
Right. When you're wanting to add or edit or change or delete contributions, you want to use this. And like Jeff said, it's only in the current year where you can do a contribution correction, because contribution correction is updating monthly earnings. And once the fiscal year closes out, then you can no longer do a contribution correction. It's only in the open year. And again,
You might use this for like what, contribution type
Type
invalid?
invalid,
Right.
contributions unreasonable.
right.
You could be enrolled, not reported, where they're enrolled, and they just didn't report any money. Now you
Right.
got to go back and manually
Yes.
and report money for them.
Yes, it's from most of your exceptions. Like Jeff said, if for example, you need to delete the earnings because they were sheltered and they should have been unsheltered, or if you put in something and now they've got a stipend that you forgot to add, then you're going to edit it. And then if it's enrolled, not reported, you're going to be adding.
Okay. And basically on that exceptions report, if it's not an enrollment issue or a termination issue, it's gonna be a contribution correction
Mhm.
issue, some type of
Yeah.
update.
Right.
So let's say an employer's, correcting their exceptions, and they're doing a whole bunch of these contribution correction reports, CCRs, and they've lost track of where they were, what they've done, or they just want to go see exactly a record of what they've done.
Right.
Where can they go to find that?
Oh, that's gonna be under that employer's menu inside EMIS. Under that employer's menu, you'll have an option called monthly correction journal. When you bring up that screen, you'll query for system code 4 and the month and year that you're looking for. So this screen, you'll have to query, 1 month at a time, but it'll show you all the contribution corrections or CCRs that were done for that reporting month.
Right.
And what you're going to be looking for is any CCRs where there was additional contributions or maybe reduced contributions, because that will affect what your contribution payments would be for that particular reporting month
Right.
for your agency.
Yeah, and we have records on this going back to what, fiscal year 2012.
I believe so. I think it goes back to 2012. So if you need to go back a ways, you can.
Right.
So we're going to cover terminations, but I just want to briefly mention enrollments because that was another way to declare exceptions. We're not going to go deep into enrollments because we kind of went through that enrollment process earlier, but the enrollment program will also help you clear a lot of exceptions for
Right.
people that are reported not enrolled. So, if you're reporting money for somebody and they truly should be enrolled and they're not, yeah, then you would just go do an enrollment and
Right.
that would clear that exception.
Mhm.
The other program is terminations. So I guess what type of exception would somebody clear via terminations program?
Right. The enrolled, not reported. If they're enrolled and you're not reporting for them, you want to make sure that they're not on leave without pay or workers' comp, or they don't need to be enrolled anymore, then you would terminate them.
Yeah, if I had to make an estimate, I would say probably 80% of exceptions are enrolled, not reported, or reported, not enrolled.
Exactly.
Yeah, most exceptions probably just need either an enrollment update done or a termination update, most.
Right. So if employers can stay on top of the enrollments and terminations, all that's going to be left really on their exception report would be, wrong contribution type.
The more serious issues.
Yeah, like if you can get rid of these,
The clutter, yeah.
and help you identify things that maybe,
You need to focus on, yes.
yeah.
Actual earnings greater than full-time earnings, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Contribution type invalid, unreasonable, those kind of issues.
And those can kind of hide when you've got a whole bunch of enrollment reported.
Right. It's
or not
hard to
enrolled.
figure out what's priority when
Mhm.
you got a whole lot, yes.
Yeah. So I guess what we're trying to say is
Stay on top of
stay on top of enrollment determinations and
Yeah.
to really help you keep your numbers low.
Mhm.
And as we're getting closer and closer to the end of the fiscal year, as an agency, as a department, we focus more on exception reports.
Right.
And the reason that is as part of our closeout process, all exceptions have to be cleared for every employer.
Right.
So, in the second half of the fiscal year, we do contact employers more frequently, trying to get them to clear their exceptions.
Right. And again, we're here for you. I mean, if you have questions or if you're having problems clearing these exceptions, you don't understand them, or you've got rejections, just reach out to us. Again, on our TRSL website, go under the Employers tab. You can click on TRSL Liaison, so you can put in your employer ID number. It's going to come up with someone who is there specifically for you to contact if you have any issues. I don't see any questions.
Right. At this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break. So approximately 10:20, we will return. Thanks. And we're back. Thanks for hanging in there with us, everybody. We're going to go into index 6. Index 4 was kind of a big index. Index 6 is one of our larger ones as well. So this is going to cover service credit, how to certify and correct service credit as well. So let's just start with some key definitions. So Kelly, what is a questionable year?
A questionable year is a fiscal year record that meets one of our TRSL criteria. We'll go over those in just a minute. And it requires service credit certification or correction.
Right. So these will be the records that employers are going to have to certify.
Right.
They're going to have a list, and that's what they're responsible for.
Yeah, after the fiscal year closes, those years that are going to be questionable, they're going to roll out on the account history, and the ones that are questionable are going to be on that report that we're going to talk about.
Now, in the last index, we talked about actual earnings, but we were looking at it more on a monthly basis, what was reported to us on that monthly file.
Right.
Now we're talking about actual earnings for the whole fiscal year.
Right. So actual earnings here, when we're talking about questionable years and service credit certifications, we're looking at all earnings during a specified fiscal year earned by that member that meets the definition of earnable compensation.
Right.
And same thing for full-time earnings.
Right.
In the last index, we were talking about full-time earnings, was reported to us on a monthly basis. But now we're talking about fiscal year basis.
Right. In a fiscal year, the full-time earnings is everything that person could have earned in the full fiscal year working at 100% effort. Just because they worked, one semester, that's not the full year. We're needing full-time earnings for the full fiscal year plus any kind of extra earnings needed to be added to that.
Right. And then service credit is just how we measure the number of years that somebody's worked and contributed to the TRSL. And we have a formula for calculating the service credit, which is simply actual earnings divided by full-time earnings.
Right.
That's going to give us the service credit for benefit computation. And then the service credit for benefit computation divided by percent effort, that's going to give us the service credit for eligibility purposes. So that's why it's so important to have accurate actual and full-time earnings, because that's what we used to calculate service credit to determine how much somebody's retirement benefit is going to be and when they're first eligible to start receiving that benefit.
Right.
So it's really crucial that we have accurate information to base that on, because as a system, we want to pay out the benefits that the right benefits that somebody's earned and be able to pay them out as soon as they're eligible to receive them.
And the actual earnings part of that formula, it's important that that employee's total earnings earned for that fiscal year are reported at the right fiscal year.
Right.
So that calculation can be correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the foundation of how we determine how much to pay somebody and when they can start receiving it. So
Right.
Yes.
if that's not accurate, we're kind of starting off behind the 8 ball. So we talked about this, the formula for determining service credit for eligibility, and we mentioned percent effort.
Right.
What exactly is percent effort?
Right. So percent effort is when someone is working every single day of the contract, but they're not working the full day. So the percent effort would be the number of hours they worked in that day divided by the number of hours that are considered a full day. And an example of that would be an employee who is working maybe 5 hours a day, and a normal full-time person would work 8 hours. So you would take 5 divided by 8, and it would give you 63% effort. Another example would be for an adjunct employee who is working maybe just the fall semester, and that would be on more like credit hours. So if they're working 6 out of 15 credit hours, you would divide that out and they would be working 40% effort for the fall.
So we talked about questionable years. What are they? How do employers identify which years are questionable, what needs to be certified?
Right. So when you go under your reports menu and you pull up your questionable year report, it's going to give you a list of years that are questionable, and it's going to give you reasons. But basically, a year would be questionable
Well, we'll go through the criteria.
Yeah,
in a
we'll go
minute,
through the
but
criteria,
but
but
just for pulling the report,
right,
need to go to the reports tab, the questionable years.
right.
And once they're there, they have multiple ways to pull that report, right?
Yes, you have different options. You can pull just your, what we call your retirement actions pending. That would be records that we consider priority. Maybe someone who is retiring or entering drop, they have a questionable year that needs to be certified. Maybe someone who's trying to purchase service credit with a teacher's retirement system, or they recently requested an estimate, a formal estimate of their future retirement benefits. If they have any questionable years and we've sent you a service credit certification request letter, those are going to be on the retirement actions pending portion of your questionable years report. You can also pull, the second option would be all outstanding questionable years. If you're a very large agency, that would probably be a lot of pages, but that would give you everything, all outstanding questionable years. The next couple of options have a 3-year timeline involved. One of them is you can pull a report that it just gives you the questionable years that are 3 years old or less. And the other option would be questionable years that are already more than 3 years old. And in a few slides from now, we'll talk about why that 3-year time period is important. The last option would give you the option to pull your questionable year report by just a single fiscal year. And no matter what option you choose, you can determine how you want the output sorted. You can sort the output by social security number, so that someone's questionable years are all together on that report. You can sort by fiscal year order, member status order, that would be the status, their TRSL status order, all the actives together, all the pending drops together, pending retirements together, so forth, or by reason code. We'll talk about reason code in just a moment, but I do recommend if you are pulling your questionable year report by a single fiscal year, that last option, I do recommend you do the sort selection by reason code. That way it will pull similar records together.
Right.
Those that have a drop in salary will be together. Those who were new hires that year will be together, et cetera.
Yeah, like most of our reports, we give you options to customize them, the way that works best for
you.
So this is just output from a questionable year report. And again, like all of our screenshots today, they can look a little bit different because we're, removing the name and social. But what you're going to want to look for is that last column, that reason for questioning year. It's going to tell you why that record is questionable. So let's just go through the criteria for why a year would be questionable in the first place.
Right.
So these reason codes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Reason code 1 corresponds to somebody whose salary decreases more than 5% from their previous fiscal year. If there's a drop of more than 5%, that year is going to be questionable. Reason code 2 is first year of employment or first year of employment after drop. Everybody's first year of employment, including the first year after drop, is always going to be questionable no matter what across the board.
Right.
Reason code 3 is somebody changed employers or has a termination date during the fiscal year. Again, that's going to make it questionable every time. And the last reason code, reason 4, is somebody has a partial year of service credit. So the service credit is anything less than 1, it's going to be just by default questionable. And years can be questionable for multiple reasons. Like in this example, the first record on here is just questionable for reason code 4, but the other ones are all questionable for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
So an employer has, identified their questionable years, they pulled their salary report, they've, sorted it however they see fit. Now they have this, we might have a huge list of records that need to be certified. They got to figure out, how do I certify these records? Well, there's 3 programs they're going to use to certify records.
Right.
Full-time only correction, questionable year certification, and prior year salary corrections. So we're going to talk about what these programs are, what they do, and when to use them.
Right.
So we'll start with full-time only corrections. Again, common theme, not real creative on what we named it. You're really correcting the full-time only.
Right.
So you want to kind of go through this screen and just give just kind of a overview of full-time only corrections?
Right. So when you're doing a full-time only correction, you're going to be correcting a year that either the full-time rate needs to be updated, or you're going to type in the same full-time rate and the service credit is going to be updated. It just means something is going to be changing, whether you're changing the full-time rate or the service credit is going to change when you type in the same full-time rate. A lot of times employers think that they can't use the full-time only correction because the full-time rate is not changing. It is for entering the same full-time rate if the service credit is changing. Just keep in mind, something is going to change.
Yeah, let's give an example of that. Like say,
Exactly.
say something's questionable because it's first year of employment.
Right.
They have first year of employment and partial year.
Mhm.
So somebody's enrolled August 10th.
Mhm.
And maybe for that employer, that's the first day of school, first day of the semester.
Yeah.
You got to realize that at TRSL, we're dealing with 200 plus agencies and they can all start on different days.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of estimate service credit based on a range of dates. And we might estimate that August 10th is 98% of a year.
Right.
But for you, maybe it's a full year. So that record closes the year
Mhm.
and we're estimating 98% service credit. It closes actual earnings $50,000, full-time earnings $50,000, service credit 98%.
Right. So what the employer is going to do is they're going to use the full-time only correction. They're going to type in that same full-time rate as 50,000, and then the system is going to change that 98% to a full year. So again, you can type in the same full-time rate as long as the service credit's changing. And then when you certify the year, you're going to put in the full-time earnings, and then you're going to either enter a reason or a comment. You can do both, but you don't have to do both. There's only so many characters that'll fit. So if it's just a generic, nothing special going on with the year, you can use a reason such as first year of employment, last year of employment, first year after drop, things like that. But if it is something going on, especially like part-time percent effort, you want to put in the comment, you want to put in the percent effort, like 50% effort for the fall or 40% effort for the spring. But in the reason, you do want to select part-time so that we will get a work object for anybody that submits a correction and the reason says part-time. And that's because we on our end have to adjust that eligibility credit when somebody is working at percent effort. It can't be done on your end.
Yeah, so typically for full-time correction, it's more likely that they will be changing the full-time earnings,
Yeah.
but there are some scenarios where
Right.
those full-time earnings are correct. The service credit is wrong. They can re-enter that same full-time and just correct the service credit.
Right. You don't want to change it by a penny or anything like that.
If it's already correct, right?
Yeah, because we'll talk about that being a possible cost later when you do that.
So this is an example of a full-time only correction where this is an excerpt from a questionable year report. In this case, the service credit is 77%. It's questionable because it's the first year of employment and a partial year. So what was reported to us during the year was actual earnings of 38,898, full-time earnings of 39,125. So the employer does, researches the records and says, no, the correct full-time was 50,155.33. That's what they're going to enter in the full-time box. In this case, there were nothing unusual, so they didn't have to add a comment. They just put first year of employment, and that's how they would certify this record.
Right.
Now, when you were talking about pulling a questionable year report earlier, you have the option of pulling it for records that are 3 years and less.
Or over 3 years.
Yeah, records that are over 3 years old. So let's talk about why that is important.
Okay, yeah, so there are two statutes that we follow, two state statutes that we follow that if a service credit record is corrected and it's over 3 years old and it results in increased service credit, the employer is treated as an employer purchasing service credit at actuarial cost. So right now, the 3-year timeline, we're in fiscal year 2025 right now. and we'll be in fiscal year 2025 until June 30th, 2025. So right now, what's considered within 3 years old would be fiscal year 2022, 2023, and 2024. Fiscal year 2022, after June 30th, 2025, that becomes over 3 years old after the end of June. So we strongly recommend and encourage our employers, if you have any questionable years out there on your questionable year report for fiscal year 2022, try to identify those, isolate those, identify those, and work those and certify those before June 30th, 2025. Get as many as you can done so that you can prevent the possibility of actuarial cost. Now, again, this 3-year timeline and a possible charge is only if the service credit increases and it's over 3 years old. If the service credit stays the same or goes down, doesn't matter if it's over 3 years old or not, it won't be a charge. Also, if the full-time earnings does not change, even if it's certified over 3 years old, that also will not be a charge. So that's why we were saying earlier, if the full-time earnings is already correct, and the only thing that needs to be corrected is the service credit, re-enter that same full-time earnings if that is indeed the right amount. Don't increase it by a penny.
Right.
Yeah, and if you pull your questionable year report for fiscal year 22 and it's just a massive amount and you're trying to get down as many as you can before the fiscal year closes out, just bypass the ones that are a full year, because no matter what you do to them, the service credit can't go up more than a full year.
Right.
Right.
And talking about the actual charge for these full-time corrections, we do an annual project every year. Once the fiscal year closes, we identify all the full-time corrections that were submitted to us from each employer for that fiscal year. There's a few that we do during the year, but the vast majority are handled via this annual project. We typically start working that in August and have letters out to the employers by November, letting them know what their charge is for those full-time corrections. We attach a copy of the journal entry and a list of every member that was corrected, the amount of service credit that changed for each person.
Yeah, typically it's like a 3-page invoice.
Yeah. So if you've had charges, you would have received those letters in the past. So that's going to cover probably 95% of the charges for full-time corrections.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that come in during the year that we can work. Those are the ones where the member is in the process of retiring or is already retired. They have a retirement application on file other than a drop application when they're entering drop. For those people, we can calculate the cost in-house once their benefit has been finalized. So those, you're not going to get an individual letter, an explanation. Those are just going to hit your employer charges screen.
Right. We'll invoice those one at a time, one record. It won't be a mass invoice like the other one.
Now, another program that you can use to certify questionable years is just questionable year certification. This is probably going to be the least of the three because everything has to be right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're not changing anything. You're just telling us that, no, what's there is correct.
Right.
So this one, like I said, it's I said by far the least of the three. You're going through your questionable year report. These are likely to be people that have a full year service credit. Maybe it's their first year of employment and it's questionable only for first year.
Mm-hmm.
They have a full year. Most likely those are going to be the ones that you use questionable year certification for.
Right, and if it's completely correct, nothing is changing, this is when you would use questionable year certification. Like Jeff said, it's typically maybe a full year, like first year of employment, last year of employment, or someone who maybe their position changed and their salary dropped more than 5% from the previous year. They accrued a full year and they've been working year after year, but you'll need to certify that year if it dropped more than 5%. And again, in the comment, you want to put a reason why it dropped. And again, always, if the person is working at percent effort, you want to select the reason part-time so that we do receive a work object, because we don't receive a work object on every single correction, but we do want to receive those that are part-time percent effort.
Yeah, for somebody that's an adjunct, say they're working 75% effort.
Right.
If that money is reported to us correctly on a monthly basis, when the year closes, let's say, to make the numbers easy, we've got actual earnings of 9,000, full-time earnings 12,000, service credit 75%. Everything's correct.
Right.
That is, they're getting 75% service credit for computation purposes.
Mhm.
But then when the employer certifies it, they're going to put part-time employee. They need to let us know that it's 75% effort, so then we can go back and change that service credit for eligibility purposes.
Right. And you may be putting PT or part-time in the comment, but you want to select that reason. Like Jeff says, if everything's correct when you certify it, and you don't select part-time in the reason code, we're not going to get a work object. Therefore, we're not going to update that eligibility credit. And that's imperative because if someone is trickling along year after year after year, and that eligibility credit is not updated, they may miss out on drop eligibility, or they may, be eligible to retire and not know it.
Right, because they're getting a member statement every year, and we want those statements to be accurate. But
Right.
if we don't know that somebody is working less than 100% effort, that's not going to be accurate information.
Right.
So we really want to emphasize the need to always select in that reason code part-time employee for anybody that's working less than 100% effort. So here we just have an example. This is another excerpt from a question year report, and somebody's going to certify this via a question year certification. So this example, actual and full-time earnings are both the same at 58,406.14. Service credit is a full year. It's being questioned for first year of employment. The employer researches it and says, yes, everything is right. So they're going to go do a question year certification. It's like reason code first year of employment. In this case, there's really nothing else to tell us, so there's no comment. So that's how they would certify it via question year certification.
I would add that if this record was questionable because of a drop in salary, and again, nothing was changing, it was still indeed a full year, you would want to make a comment to address why there was a drop in salary from the previous year, like less extra pay or did summer school the year before, and something to address why the earnings dropped. And what's this program is, you can only use it on a limited basis. As stated before, everything has to be correct. The actual, the full-time, the posted service credit. If you're not supposed to use this program, after you enter the employee's system code and social and fiscal year that you're trying to certify, if this is not the right program to use, the program will not let you go any further, and it'll try to direct you to the full-time only corrections program.
And vice versa. If you're trying to use the full-time only correction and you're supposed to be using questionable year certification, it will flag it and tell you to use the other one.
Right, but the other one will give you that message until you get almost to the end.
Yes.
But this one will give it to you right before you really start.
Yeah, we try to make this helpful so that you can't do the wrong thing.
Right.
So the third program you would use is prior salary corrections, and this is when you have to change the actual earnings.
Right.
This program, so you're changing the actual earnings, but you're also certifying the full-time earnings.
Right.
So when you do this, it's really like a two-part correction. Sometimes the full-time earnings that's there already is correct, and you're just restating them.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes you're entering what the correct full-time earnings should be. So some common mistakes that we see on this is somebody that doesn't work a full year.
Right.
If somebody starts in the second semester, like they start in January,
Mhm.
and they'll match the actual and full-time, which would give them a full year service credit, but in reality, they only work half a year.
Right.
So
Or
always,
if someone works just summer school and they're, just certifying it with just the summer school, it has to include a yearly contract. It can't be just 1 month. It has to be the year salary and the extra earnings, which would be summer or whatever. But it cannot just be a partial year. And just keep in mind, if someone did not work the full year, the full-time rate should be more than the actual.
right, just keep in mind that service credit formula. So what this is going to do is going to take the actual earnings that you're entering, dividing it by the full-time earnings that you're entering, and that's going to be their service credit. So if you know they didn't work the full year, you shouldn't give them a full year of service credit.
Right. Another difference on this correction is when, again, you have to enter the actual and the full-time, but you have to give a reason and or a comment for both the actual and the full-time.
So a couple of slides back, we're talking about, actual cost for full-time corrections. Well, those same statutes apply to prior year corrections as well. So same time frame, you have the 3 years. So again, we're in 2025 right now. So anything 2021 and back, any prior year correction for those years where you're increasing the earnings to result in an actual cost. If you're doing a correction for a fiscal year that's less than 3 years old, and for this conversation, we're talking about corrections that increase the earnings and contributions. So if you do a correction for a year that's less than 3 years old that increases the earnings and contributions, you're going to be charged the member and employer contributions plus interest at the judicial rate. If you're doing a correction that's, for a year over 3 years old, where you're increasing the contributions, you're going to be charged the greater of either the actuarial cost for that service credit that's increasing, or the member and employer contributions plus interest at the actuarial rate. So we're gonna do an actuarial cost, calculate the contributions and interest, whichever higher is what the employer is going to be charged, and that's per statute. That's not just a TRSL policy. That's state law.
Right, and those are the processes where we would request the employer the $200 calculation fee for those
Right.
types of situations.
Yeah. So if you submit a correction, a salary correction that's over 3 years old, it's increasing earnings, we're going to request that fee. Don't anticipate that we're going to. Sometimes, rarely we've seen people send us that fee before we would request it.
Yes.
Right.
Wait for us to request it. Because when we request it, we're typically getting some other information as well, like the current year salary, if there's any questionable years. So,
A lot of factors involved with that.
yeah, don't get ahead of the process. Let it play out. These create work options for us. We're working them. We'll request the fee and kick off that process.
But when we do request the fee, very important that the fee is sent within 30 days.
Right.
Right.
If we don't receive the fee within 30 days, we'll have to cancel that correction. You have to resubmit it. And then the interest date would be the date that we received that second correction. We charge interest up until that date.
Right.
Now, something kind of unique to higher ed is this whole, adjunct employment, adjunct professors.
Right.
If an employer does a correction online for an adjunct, and sometimes they can tell us everything they need in that comment.
Yes.
They'll tell us the percent effort for each semester. Sometimes they even put how much money was earned each semester. Sometimes we can look at the breakdown and see. Sometimes that's all we need.
Right.
But there's other times where we get a correction, or maybe we're auditing a member's record where an employer hasn't submitted a correction yet, and we see some adjunct time.
Can't make heads or tails. Yeah.
Right. So we have a letter that we'll send when we need additional information in order to certify years that look like they're adjunct.
Right.
Either because an employer has told us it's adjunct, but there's still some missing information that we need more on, or like I said, we just found it on our own through our process of reviewing members' records. We have this adjunct letter. We'll send it to you. We'll ask you to fill it out and send it back to us.
Kind of breaks it down semester by semester.
Yeah, look at each semester. It talks about if they did summer school. It's kind of detailed. So I'm sure you've received these letters from us before requesting adjunct certification. That it's not required for every adjunct,
Right.
but if it is, this is something that we'll send to you. It's not something on our website that you can just access and fill out to us. We ask you, do a full-time correction, let us know it's adjunct, put as much information in that comment as you can, and oftentimes that's all we need, but if we do need more,
Right.
we'll request it.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little complicated with adjunct, especially when they're working different percent efforts, for different semesters. Again, we are here to help you. If you receive one of these forms and you don't know what to do with it, or you're it's a little bit more complicated and you just want to reach out to us to make sure that you are filling it out correctly, reach out to your assigned liaison, and they're here to help you, walk you through everything you need to with these forms.
Now, in that same vein as adjuncts, and hourly adjuncts,
Right.
and we don't really see these more with universities. We see these more with technical colleges, community colleges, where they have people they say are hourly adjuncts,
Yes.
where they're maybe allowed to work up to a certain point, or they're work up to 28 hours a week.
Right.
But they don't always have a set schedule. They're not working, a consistent percent effort. Universities, we typically see, they're going to work 9 out of 15 hours for the first semester and whatever for the second semester. These people, their hours shift.
Right.
So, because we do see this kind of frequently, let's talk about what employers should do for these hourly adjuncts. It's the first step. Are they eligible?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If they don't have 10 years, are they working over 20 hours a week?
Consistently.
Right.
Right.
If not, they're not eligible.
Right.
In that case, they shouldn't be reported at all.
Right.
So let's assume that yes, they either have the 10 years or they're working over the 20 hours a week. The employer should calculate the full-time amount.
Mhm.
If it's an hourly worker, there should be an hourly rate of pay,
Right.
and they should know their months of contract. Typically, from what we've seen in the past, these are either 9 months or 12 months.
Yes.
Then they need to calculate that hourly rate times however many hours are available to work in that contract, and that's their full-time earnings. So these would typically be certified via a full-time correction. If they did work a set schedule with a percent effort, choose part-time employee like we talked about earlier.
Right.
They worked as needed, just tell us that in the comment. Tell us as needed.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between part-time percent effort and just part-time as needed. The part-time percent effort, they're working every day possible in the contract, and those people will get extra eligibility credit. If someone is working as needed, they may work 2 hours today, 5 hours tomorrow. Those people are not going to get extra eligibility credit, so they are not considered percent effort.
So I don't see any questions for this topic so far. So at this point, we're going to take a quick break just to switch out panelists. All right, and we're back. We just have a couple sections left before we wrap up today. Jennifer George from the Retirement Department has joined us to go over retirement process and leave information and kind of what's the employer's responsibility once somebody applies for retirement. So somebody reaches the end of their career, decides to retire, turns in their retirement application. What do we typically need from the employer at that time?
Right. So the main things we need is if there's any questionable years, we need all questionable years certified. We need sick leave days reported for all fiscal years, including years during drop, and the sick leave days paid at retirement. And we need the agency certification, which is the Form 11B. That is going to certify their termination date and their earnings, which will allow us to calculate their service credit.
Now, when you start requesting that information, what's the process and the timeframes for when we expect that from employers?
So we'll review the files to see if anything is missing, and if it is, we'll try and send a first request around the member's date of retirement. We'll give it 45 days, and if we don't receive a response, we'll send a second request. And then after about 30 days, it hits the final request stage. At this point, if we haven't received the certification, we'll probably we'll send you the letter, but we'll email you, we will call you, we will notify the member that there's missing information. Because we try and have all the information certified within 90 days of their date of retirement.
Right, so the whole process from first request to final request is about 90 days.
Yes.
Now, one of the things you mentioned that we needed is this agency certification, Form 11B. Like we've talked about questionable years and certifying those, and the last index, but this is new.
Yes.
This agency certification. At least we haven't talked about it yet today. Put it that way.
So we request this anytime a member goes into drop or retires. This form is going to certify their current fiscal year service credit. So this form, you're going to have to provide the termination date, which is going to be their last day worked or the day before they enter drop, or their last day of official leave. And then we want the full-time earnings. And so we're going to calculate service credit from the actual earnings that you've already reposted against the full-time earnings as if they would have worked a full year. It's important not to submit this form until all of the earnings have posted, because once again, we're using that to calculate the service credit. And if not all the money's there, the member will be shorted service credit. And it'll probably result in us reaching out for clarification.
Right, so you mentioned they shouldn't submit this until all the money has been posted.
Right.
So somebody has a retirement date of mid-May. We're expecting the employer to report money in May.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll also accept money in June.
Mm-hmm.
So it would typically be in July before we would.
Yes, if that's how their agency is posting, or yes.
Now, Form 11B, there's another wrinkle for people that are retiring after drop, right?
Right. So for members who work at least 3 years after drop, they could potentially have a new final average comp calculated. So if they work 2 years after drop, we're going to request that you complete the bottom portion of the Form 11B. This is going to tell us the last full fiscal year that they were in drop and their actual and full-time earnings while they were in drop. And we need this information just to make sure there's no caps.
Now, there's kind of a question about termination date versus retirement date. You hear people say, the last day of school is May 24th. You say, I'm retiring on May 24th.
Right. So if the last day of school is May 24th and you intend to work that day, they work that day, then the date of retirement will be the next day, May 25th. So the retirement date is always going to be after the termination date or after we get the application, if that's later. But you cannot have the termination date and the retirement date be the same day.
Now, when the retirement department gets a service retirement application, ILSB, drop, whatever, anything other than this return to work supplement application, do y'all typically enter the termination date, or can the retirement analyst enter that termination date?
Right. A typical process is when we receive a retirement application, whatever date the member chooses as their retirement date, we will terminate them in the system the day before. So this return to work supplement is different because those members are under a benefit suspension as a RTW employee. So when we cannot resume their benefits until we actually receive this form, and the employer has to go online and provide the termination date. We cannot provide the termination date or terminate the member.
Right. So that's, like I said, an important difference for employers to be aware of, is that for these people who return to work, and we'll cover return to work a little bit more detail in the next topic, but there's people that return to work that then can earn a benefit and basically re-retire.
Mm-hmm.
And when we receive that application, TRSL is not going to enter that termination date, right? It has to be the employer to enter that date.
Right, because there is a benefit suspension. So in order to resume that benefit, the employer has to term them online, and we have to have this form.
Now, another thing that you said was required was sick leave information. The employer has to report to us sick leave information.
Right, so they, you can go under the updates tab and you can report sick leave. We need it for every fiscal year that the member worked, including years and drop. We also need the certification of sick leave days paid at retirement. If you pay a member their 25 days at retirement, we need that reported, even if it's 0.
Right, and as you said, they can find this through the updates tab in EMS. Now, this is a screenshot of what that screen looks like when somebody goes in to add sick leave.
Right, so when an employer is going to update the sick leave, we're going to have to include the months of contract, whether it's 9, 10, 11, or 12. And then you're going to add the number of sick leave days used for that fiscal year. And then if the member did work summer school, we would we need the days of summer school worked and at what % effort. And all that can be entered under that updates tab.
Now, when an employer goes to enter sick leave, the program is going to look at the employment dates and kind of put a start and end date, and they're going to fill in everything in between. But if they do drop, there's no employment history record for those drop years. So how should they go about entering sick leave used during drop?
Right, since the members are not earning service credit, there's no employment history line. So you have to actually uncheck the use employment history box. This will allow you to manually enter the members' beginning and ending dates of drop so that you can enter their sick leave.
So we've been talking about entering sick leave manually, typically at the time of retirement, or maybe employers are doing it manually on an annual basis.
Right.
But there's another easier way to get sick leave to us, right? They can submit to us a file,
Right.
and they can do it annually. This is just a file layout. They can find this, I believe, in Index 18 of our Employer Procedures Manual. Because the benefits of submitting an annual file to us is once you submit it to us, you don't have to worry about storing that information anymore. We've had, employers that have gone through, floods, hurricanes, fires, all sorts of disasters where
Records are lost.
records are just lost.
Right.
So if employers submit to a file to us, we have that information. They're not responsible for, like, once we have it, we have it.
Right.
If something happens to their data, well, we have it and it's not lost, and the members can still get their, unused leave converted at retirement and get the benefit that they're entitled to.
Right. Even if they're reluctant on submitting it due to summer school days worked or something, they're, kind of iffy about how to enter that information. Even if you just omit the summer school and just submit the sick leave records, you can always go back and edit any summer school.
Right. Or if you have, I know that's an issue that employers say that we have trouble entering this % effort for summer. Include everybody else that didn't work summer, and then go back and do those manually. But ideally, we would like to see employers submit this sick leave data file to us on an annual basis, just because if they do it, it's gonna be less they have to do at retirement,
Right.
And make that process go faster. It's less for them to manually enter. So
The members can be finalized a lot faster.
yeah,
Yes.
if employers aren't already doing this, because a lot of them are, but those that aren't, I would recommend looking into it, seeing if it's something that you can incorporate into your process.
Right.
Now, you also mentioned sick leave days paid.
Right. So this is often overlooked, but we need it report anytime a member is retiring. We have to know if they were paid out any sick leave days, the 25 days or whatnot. We need it reported even if it's 0. Sometimes it does confuse employers if a member is deferring their retirement to age 60. They might have a gap in their employment. So we will reach out to their last known employer to see if they were paid out any sick leave days at termination. But the main thing is we need it reported even if it is 0 days paid.
And once an employer submits sick leave to us, it populates that member's sick leave file. This is just a screenshot of somebody's sick leave file showing what was submitted. And it goes into pretty good detail. It tells you, who submitted it, the date it was submitted, what was entered. If an employer wants to know what's already been submitted for somebody, they can go to their record in EMS, go to members, select that sick annual leave, and that's what's going to show them.
Right.
So before we take a break, there's a question going back to, I guess, where we were talking about hourly adjuncts. Somebody's asking, for a 9-month hourly, are the total hours for FTE calculations 1,440 hours or 1,600 hours with 20 payrolls at $80 and 20 payrolls at 80 hours? Well, it's really going to be the days in their contract. So if somebody's a 9-month employee, or how many days does that break down to? 180? It might vary from employer to employer, but you should really be calculating that for an hourly employee. Take hourly rate times days in the hours a day times days in the contract.
Right.
So it could vary a little bit from employer to employer, depending on how many days are in that contract.
Right. I think 1440 was on the slide, and that was just an example. And that example was 8 hours being the full day times 180 days in the contract. So it is like a calculation. It is a formula. So to get total number of hours, it would be the number of hours you consider full day times the number of days in the contract.
All right. So with that, we're going to take another 10-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to cover return to work. All right, and we're back. I know we've covered a lot up to this point. We're going to wrap up today with return to work. So Cherish Wilson has joined us to cover return to work.
Hello.
So return to work laws are somewhat complex, multi-layered. There's different components, like the indexes that we've covered so far in the procedures manual are not like multi-part indexes,
Right.
but index 15, return to work, has multiple parts because the
Right.
law has multiple parts.
Mhm.
So I guess this slide is kind of an overview of the return to work law and the different parts of it. Kind of tell us what we're looking at here.
Sure. So these is just these are our statutes that we follow. It's going to be LARS 11710, 710.1, and 710.2, which is only applicable to higher ed. The LA 11710.1 is going to be that 2020 return to work group, those that retired on or after July 1st, 2020, and also those who elected to transfer from that 2010 to 2020 group. 11710 is going to be the one for those who only retired before July 1st, 2020. And then that 11710.2 is the one that allows us to have that higher ed critical shortage for the adjunct professors in the nursing. I do want to point out that the return to work laws are going to be applicable to all work that a retiree will do. That's going to include part-time, seasonal, temporary, and those that are corporate, contract, and contract.
Yeah, that's a good point because when we were talking earlier in index 2 with
Right.
enrollment eligibility, we're emphasizing this is non-retirees, this is non-retirees.
Right.
And then now we are talking about retirees.
This is retirees, and all employment is going to apply with these return to work laws.
So I know that one question that we get a lot is, an employer will call us and say, can I hire so-and-so? They're a retiree. Can I hire them to do X, Y, or Z?
Right.
So what's kind of the response to that?
The answer is you can always hire someone. We don't control if you can or cannot hire someone for employment. The only thing that we're in charge of is how a retiree's benefit is going to be affected. There are 3 ways they can be affected. It'll be no impact, suspension, or they'll fall under that earnings limit category. I do want to point out there is a standard 12-month waiting period for all retirees. It's going to be from their first day of retiree on throughout that year until the next date that is the same falls around again in that next year. You cannot get around this waiting period. It applies to everyone, all work, critical shortage, earnings limit, all of those.
So that 12-month waiting period, you can hire somebody within that time,
Right.
but their benefit's going to be suspended.
Correct. Their benefit will be suspended during that employment, and it will start back once that date passes or the employment is terminated.
So this looks like a good slide, kind of comparing 2010 and 2020 and where they overlap.
Right. So this is just a good visual aid for you. This will give you your specifics of 2010, your specifics of 2020, and then where they kind of overlap. The critical shortage here doesn't apply as much as it does for K through 12, but they are in both groups under the statute.
Now, once an employer hires a retiree, what is their responsibility? What are they supposed to do?
So their main thing that they need to do is to submit that online enrollment through EMIS and to submit it within 30 days of hire. There are some forms that need to be filled out specifically for 2020. It's going to be that 15 ELEC. And when you are giving your termination dates, you also need to make sure that those are being submitted under a timely manner as well. That Form 7A is going to be required for refunds of contributions. There are portions that need to be signed by you and the retiree. And then if a retiree is going to utilize that option 2 under 2020, an 11 RTW is going to be required for them and your termination date in order for their benefit to be resumed.
And what's the significance of that 30 days?
So if they are not submitted within 30 days and someone goes over their earnings limit or they're getting a benefit when they are supposed to be under a suspension category, you're going to be charged for all of those days, that money over the earnings limit or the benefit, the month that they receive that benefit.
Now, I guess we don't want to scare anybody with this slide, but there is an annual retiree audit.
Right.
So can you talk about, what's expected from the employer as far as what they have to report to kick off that process, and then what
Sure.
happens once we get it?
Yeah, so we just want you all to submit a raw salary file. This must be submitted by August 15th of each fiscal year, and you're going to get a request from audit if needed for more information. This doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get a charge or that you're in trouble, you did something wrong. It just means they need some more information. Just make sure you are cooperating with the auditors, and they will reach out if they need anything else.
And you mentioned a minute ago about, the importance of getting those enrollments in within 30 days to avoid any type of overpayments. But
Right.
beyond that, what's the best way of, avoiding charges due to a return to work audit?
Making sure that you are submitting accurate enrollments, being in the correct provision. If someone was supposed to be under a suspension category and you enroll them under an earnings limit, that's something that we would find on an audit. That would be a charge for you for all of the months of benefit that they received that they were not supposed to.
Right. So since that initial enrollment is kind of so important, what would be your advice to somebody who's enrolling somebody, but they're maybe not sure which provision to enroll them under?
Right. Just reach out to us. Ask plenty of questions. That's what we're here for. If you're unsure of something, you can always refer to the procedures manual. And if you don't understand, even after going there, you can always give us a call or shoot us an email.
So a couple of slides back, we were looking at, the diagram and the kind of summary of the 2010 versus 2020. I guess kind of the most basic thing is employers have to determine what group somebody is in, right?
Right.
So how would they go about determining that?
Okay, so this looks a lot like our flow chart. So you're first going to ask the question, is the date of retirement before July 1st, 2020? If no, they're going to be in the 2020 group. If yes, you'll move to that next question, which is, does the retiree have previous return to work employment? If no, they automatically fall into that 2010 group. If yes, it's going to be indicated by their last return to work employment type. This is going to be that portal type indicator under their employment history. If it's A, it's going to fall under 2010. If it's B, it's going to fall under 2020. The big difference between 2010 and 2020 is 2010 is more position based, and 2020 is going to be based on the way that they are hired.
So you mentioned, identifying the group and the different portals. Here's some screenshots from EMIS that employers can rely on to make those determinations of whether they're 2010 versus 2020.
Right. So this is just like a screenshot of some portions of the member summary screen. The status information is going to be at just right under their social address part. It's going to show you their date of retirement. So that's 6/30/2016. That's highlighted here. That is their date of retirement. And then if you go down a little further, you're going to see their employment history. This person is an Act 1173 or grandfathered retiree. So they're going to fall under Return to Work Portal A, which is the 2010 group. If it was someone else that fall under the 2020, it'll be Portal B. And then this last portion is if you are submitting an enrollment and the person is eligible to switch, you're going to see Portal A and Portal B. If they're not eligible to switch yet because they haven't had any return to work employment, you'll see just Portal A. And if they fall under the 2020 dates, you'll see just Portal B.
Right. So kind of as a last resort, the employer can always go into the enrollment program
And do a mock
enter it
enrollment.
and kind of see what comes up. That's going
Right.
to tell you,
Just make sure you don't submit it.
right, until you're actually ready to
Right.
do it.
Enroll the person.
So this looks like a good breakdown of the 2010 law, the different provisions. Can you kind of explain what we're seeing here?
Sure. This slide and the next slide are going to be really good reference tables for you. This is the reference table for 2010. It'll show you how the benefits are impacted. As mentioned before, no impact is going to be that grandfathered and advanced speech. Contributions are required for these positions, but they are refundable upon termination. Then you have the earnings limit, which is going to be 25% of the annual benefit. That's eligible for 4 of those positions They are explicitly listed out in the law. Anything outside of these positions are going to be under that suspended benefit. This includes like athletics, coaches, admin, anything like that. And I do want to point out contributions are not required for that suspended benefit.
And here's kind of a breakdown for 2020.
So 2020, it has return to work option 1, which is going to be the earnings limit. That's 25% of that final average comp. So that's different from the earnings limit category in 2010. This is the big reason why a lot of people switch from 2010 to 2020 is to get that higher earnings limit. This is available to all part-time and full-time employment as long as they're directly employed. Contributions are required for this one, but like before, they are refundable upon termination. And then you have return to work option 2, which is a suspended benefit. It allows the member to get that additional service credit for a higher overall benefit. This is available to full-time direct employment positions, so not the part-time here. And then you have those contract employment, which is going to be suspended benefit for all employment by contract or corporate contract. I do want to point out under option 2, this is really important. You have to submit your termination date, and the retiree needs to submit that 11 RTW on or before their last day of work in order for us to turn on their benefit. And then you have the 2022 option here. That's going to be the critical shortage portion that applies to higher ed. It is no impact to the benefit. It's only applicable to adjunct professors in a nursing program where shortage exists, and the contributions are refundable upon termination here.
So you mentioned this 2022 law, critical shortage.
Right.
It's not enough for somebody to just, oh, we have a critical shortage.
Right.
There's a process to go through, right?
Right here. So the critical shortage is a little different here. It only applies to that adjunct professor in the nursing program where the critical shortage exists. So to declare, you must list the unfilled positions or must list the positions filled by retirees on the websites of the post-secondary institution, your institution's management board, and at the Board of Regents. And the retiree also has to meet the eligibility criteria, which is retired on or before July 30th, 2020. They have to have at least 30 years of service, and they have to be at least 62.
And briefly look up to see if any questions were coming in for return to work. If not, that finishes our return to work portion. Kelly, you want to talk about the training that's available for employers?
Right. So today our training was strictly from the Employer Procedures Manual, which is again on our website underneath the Employers tab. If you feel you need some more one-on-one training, I am available for you, whether by phone, Zoom, in person, whether I travel to you or you come to TRSL. Again, all of our numbers, names, numbers, information is listed on our website under TRSL Liaisons. Reach out to me by email, phone, if you're wanting to schedule some training.
All right, thanks, Kelly. As I mentioned when we first started this morning, you will be getting an email with a link to a survey that should go out tomorrow. Please take a little bit of time, give us some feedback. Like I said, this was a new format for us, so we want to get some feedback, see what you thought about it. But those surveys should be going out in email tomorrow. And with that, if there's no questions coming through, that concludes this year's Higher Ed Annual Employer Training. So thank everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
See you next year.